Welcome to the Climate and Coordination RCAST, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and RChain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, RChain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey.
All right, welcome to this morning's Climate and Coordination RCAST. Today we have several different topics we want to discuss. First being basically an announcement or just letting everyone know that I think today, November 12th, is the last day of the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow, Scotland. I'm not sure if certain delegations will be staying behind to try to negotiate for more intense deals or more just deals, but it seems like today might be the last day. So if there are any other announcements from COP that are major, of course, we'll bring them to you next week. But I just wanted to share this little piece from the BBC, which explains that fossil fuel industry has the largest delegation at COP, which I think is completely absurd. It says here there are more delegates at COP26 associated with the fossil fuel industry than from any single country. Campaigners led by Global Witness assessed the participant list published by the UN at the start of the meeting. They found that 503 people with links to fossil fuel interests had been accredited for the climate summit. These delegates are said to lobby for oil and gas industries, and campaigners say they should be banned, which I totally agree with, but I also think it's tricky to reform an industry if you don't have that industry represented. But given their past, I think it's tricky. It says here the fossil fuel industry has spent decades denying and delaying real action. We know that. Their influence is one of the biggest reasons why 25 years of UN climate talks have not led to real cuts. And I guess one of the signs that people think that COP has failed is that the parts per million of CO2 has continued to rise, even though we've had 25 years of these talks. So obviously we still haven't figured out how to at least keep it the same. And then obviously the next step would be to lower it as rapidly as possible. Although Greg has pointed out many times that even if you turn off all fossil fuel emissions today, you still have a world of problems coming up, but at least you're not adding more emissions, which I think is the first step. It says about 40,000 people are attending the COP. Brazil has the biggest official team delegation of negotiators with 479. So the fossil fuel industry has just about 25 more people than Brazil. Turkey has about 300. Russia has about 300. The UK is about 230, Canada is 270, and it goes on down from there. So America is not, the US is not on this list. So that's interesting. That means that we have far fewer delegates than some other nations, which is maybe fine. It also says that fossil fuel lobbyists are members of 27 country delegations, including Canada and Russia. The fossil fuel lobby at COP is larger than the combined total of the 8 delegations from the countries worst affected by climate change in the past 20 years. It says more than 100 fossil fuel companies are represented at COP. So I just wanted to say this because I think it's just really difficult. Like, I think, people who don't go to these conferences, like me, for example, I've never been to a COP. I think like maybe we underestimate just how difficult it is to bring together all these different groups, politicians, activists, all these professionals in these industries that are dying, and I think I do really have respect for people, that are trying to get these people to come together, because I think it's really, really difficult to do, because you can't just cut people out. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess you can try to make decisions without them and just say, go ahead and live with it. But, these hundreds of people that work in the fossil fuel industry, like, they have the leases to the land, they have, the power to drill or not drill. I mean, they just have so much infrastructure. So it's like, even if you kind of kick them out and just say, hey, we're going to negotiate and you're going to just enjoy what we come up with. I don't know. I just think it's a really difficult scenario, but I think it's super sad that they are the biggest delegation. So that's a problem to me. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, when you posted that article the other day, I read through it, and it really made me sad, because it's just like, really, the largest, and the idea that delegates are interwoven with lobbyists. Like, what the hell is that? There should be at least a few degrees of separation there. Any lobbyists, but
yeah, like you're saying, if you're a lobbyist, you can't be a delegate, for example.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, so that's just, it's depressing, really. But I guess there's another possibly glass half full way of looking at it. If these oil companies are understanding that they need to transition to other sources of income, then maybe. But something tells me that that's not what these people were there at COP26 for the most part.
Yeah, it's really hard to imagine that they're all there with altruistic, roll up your sleeves sort of, ideas. It really, since they're in such high numbers, and given their track record in the past 50 or so years, it just feels like they're trying to, influence the process to their best interests, which is not the best interests of everyone, so
like what has to happen by the next COP26 is that any oil company that's permitted in there should be there to be part of the solution. And
right.
BP has had the slogan "Beyond Petroleum" for many years now. It's probably all lip service, but it's at least a recognition and an understanding that they have to shift their focus as a company.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I had an uncle who used to work in wind power at BP, actually, but now he has his own company. But so I don't think it's all totally lip service. I think there are people who are trying to turn that ship around, but it's just so weighed down with so much baggage of every kind: infrastructure baggage, personnel baggage, historical baggage, PR baggage. I mean, it's like you couldn't possibly have more baggage. You know what I mean? Potentially legal baggage, right? I don't think that would be an easy job to have, but it's tricky. But that brings me, if you don't have any more comments about this, there's another one that it's actually kind of funny, but it's amazing. I guess it's not funny, but I hope nobody gets offended by me thinking this is funny, but I actually think it's amazing and super courageous. From The Guardian, it says Tuvalu seeks Freudian slip. Tuvalu seeks to retain statehood if it sinks completely as sea levels rise. So Tuvalu is an island nation which is northeast of Australia. For those who don't know, it's pretty small. It says here, Tuvalu is looking at legal ways to keep its ownership of its maritime zones and recognition as a state, even if the Pacific Island nation is completely submerged due to the climate crisis. We're actually imagining a worst case scenario where we are forced to relocate or our lands are submerged. We're looking at legal avenues where we can retain our ownership of our maritime zones as a state under international law. That's what their minister Simon Kofi just said. And this is the funny part, but I think it's amazing. Kofi did a presentation at COP26, standing in knee-deep water in the ocean. And you can go on YouTube and watch it, I'm sure, but there's pictures of it all over the place. And he said, we didn't think it would go viral as we saw over the last few days. We have been very pleased with that, and hopefully that carries the message and emphasizes the challenges that we are facing in Tuvalu. Tuvalu is an island nation of about 11,000 people. Its highest point is just 4.5 meters above sea level. Since 1993, sea levels have risen about 0.2 inches a year, according to a 2011 Australian government report. Kofi, the minister, said he delivered the video address in a place that used to be dry land, adding that Tuvalu is seeing a lot of coastal erosion. So I think it's important to remember when people talk about sea level rise that, like, when you think of sea level rising an inch, for example, that doesn't necessarily mean the water gets like more inland by an inch. It means the whole water level went up an inch, but the water could go for miles inland just from being a little bit higher, depending on, what the land is around it. And I think when I was in school learning about this, we would go onto Google Maps sometimes, and you can actually put in different levels of sea level to see what areas would look like with different levels of sea level, which I think is a really cool tool. Actually might have been on Google Earth, but anyway, one of the Google apps does that, and we used to do that in school. And I think sometimes if you just change the sea level by a few inches, I think people are surprised that at a certain level the water goes much further inland, and it's like, oh, that's not a few inches, that's like, hundreds of meters of water. But that's because you're talking about the level of the sea rising, right? Not the place where it hits the shore. So anyway, last thing from this little short article, it says, when asked what Tuvalu's people think about rising sea levels, Kofi said, some of the older generation say they are happy to go down with the land, while others are leaving. One thing is clear, that the people have a very close tie to their land. So that's just, that is incredibly sad. And I just think it's amazing that he delivered this address standing in this water up to his knees, with a podium in the ocean. I just think it's amazing and funny, but amazing. So yeah, I'll pause there, but I thought it was very inspiring.
Oh, it's a very potent image. And because it literally is, he's standing in a location that used to be dry land. I think it's a good statement to make. He's not just kind of trying to kind of create some kind of like analogy or something. This is actually where dry land was, right? So yeah, I think it's a powerful statement, visual statement. It's an interesting idea too, like the idea that the representation of the people that make up that nation is what the nation is. It's the community. And so the idea of relocating that community while retaining their maritime ownership over that chunk of the ocean, it's a really interesting idea. And it also conjures up the thoughts about how attached people are to their homes. I'm not this way, but there are people who have grown up their whole lives and they've never moved. Some of them never even traveled. Yeah, that's just where they are, and so their very definition of self is so connected to the definition of their home, they can't separate the two. And I feel sorry for them, because
yeah, I don't feel very connected to where I grew up, but I feel very connected to other places that I've lived. Very, very connected. So it's very interesting to me that there are some places that I lived in for longer places that don't mean as much. And there are some places that I lived in for shorter periods of time, and they mean a whole lot more to me. And yeah, it's very powerful. Yeah, it's scary, you know, when you feel that strong connection to a place that might not stay forever.
Hmm.
So you just have to go on remembering it in your soul, I guess, in your spirit. But that's easy for us to say, right? Because we don't depend on where we live for our food or whatever. Like, we could just move somewhere else. I think it's even deeper when you think about people who depend on a certain place, for the preservation of a language or something else. I mean that would be really, really difficult.
Well, I know that people who live on islands tend to be quite even more, the community becomes even more important to them. Here in Canada, we have a province that's an entire island called Newfoundland, and the people in Newfoundland are very, very uh, if basically they say, if you're not from Newfoundland, you're from away. They say that's how they refer to you, as though you're from away. And it's like, so I can also understand how even stronger that kind of sense of community is when you're talking about relocating an island, a small island. So I guess hopefully they can do this and find a location on land somewhere where at least that sense of community is restored, and they can kind of port all over together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. um okay, so if there's no more comments on that, this is the last story I wanted to share today, and then I'll turn it over to you, Daryl. This is about this is from space.com. This is a report from NASA that talks about crops, and some of it is terrifying and some of it is actually not terrifying. I was really interested to read this because it didn't go exactly the way I thought it was going to go. So this is interesting to me, and I just thought we've talked about crops quite a bit on this call before, so I just thought it would be worth mentioning. Headline is climate change will impact food crops by end of decade, NASA says. And whatever NASA says is the truth. Just kidding. But probably it is. It says corn is one of the world's most important crops, but it may soon take a significant hit from the progressing climate change, throwing global food supply into turmoil. We know that. Used to make everything from tasty popcorn to feed cows and chickens. Corn is the most produced crop in the world. Didn't know that. But as early as 2030, its yields might go down by nearly a quarter. So that'll be problematic. Hopefully they can solve those engineering problems, or we can eat something else other than corn. That is if global warming continued at the current pace. That is the forecast. But of course, it could speed up. Probably is not going to slow down, but let's not rule it out. It says, of course, as we know, the models showed that many tropical regions that currently rely on corn production might become too hot for these plants to thrive. Of course, we know that too. The US, China, and Brazil are currently the world's biggest corn producers, but the crop is also grown in many parts of Central Asia, Western Africa, and Central America. All of these regions might see their yields decline within the coming decade. So that's really scary. But it says here also the study found that this NASA study found that wheat, which is the second most important crop grown for human consumption, the number one is apparently rice. So I guess it's rice, wheat, and then corn, or some combination of those three, depending on where you are in the world. Wheat might thrive better in the new warmer world. It says its yields might jump by 17% by the end of the decade. The researchers used two types of models to simulate the crop behavior. First, they modeled how Earth's climate will respond to the different possible greenhouse gas emission scenarios all the way up to the year 2100. They focused on changes in temperature and rainfall, but also ground concentrations of carbon dioxide, which might affect photosynthesis and therefore the plant's growth. So yeah, and it talks a little bit more about how they did the study, and links to the full study if anybody wants to read it at the bottom. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting. Obviously, just because corn might suffer and wheat might thrive does not mean that it's half a dozen either way. With climate, obviously, the climate crisis is a problem 99 out of 100 times. And sometimes you can find one thing that will do better. I don't think that means that climate is a good thing, as our friends in Russia sometimes like to say. But I do think it's worth noting that not everything is going to get worse. Most things are going to get worse. Some things might get a little better, though. So I just think it's interesting because remember, it's climate change, it's changing. So I just think it's important to remember that not everything is a downward spiral. We might find certain things improve. And again, not to say that means climate change is good, but I just think it's important to remember that not everything is always going to get worse, I guess. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Just thinking about the actual food items, and maybe this is very kind of first world of me to say, but really humans shouldn't be eating that much corn and wheat anyway. Both of those things aren't really that good for you. But I guess beggars can't be choosers in some parts of the world, and you got to feed people. But also too, some of the biggest crops are from Monsanto. So corn, the vast majority of corn that you eat with your popcorn and everything else is GMO, as is soy, which is why the Brazilian rainforest is getting chopped down to feed cows. So, part of me is kind of going, okay, well, let's just let this corn business go down. if we can shift to some other food item. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, the monoculture thing in America is not good. Michael Pollan is such an amazing author, and Greg has mentioned him to me before, but he's been in a bunch of different films about the food industry, and he's written a number of books as well. And I think what he says about food is eat food, not too much, mostly plants. That's sort of his slogan.
yeah,
And yeah, I agree with you that, eating a bunch of corn and wheat is maybe not the
food.
healthiest thing. I mean, there's so much diversity, especially if you talk about, crops that Native Americans grow and understand. I mean, Native Americans were the original climate activists in a certain way, and original climate scientists, right? Because they know so much more about growing crops and different types of crops, and the thousands of different types of corn and apples and everything, that the variety that you can get. But we've sort of squandered that, and so it would be very interesting, and I think worthwhile, to try to bring back some of the diversity of crops and agriculture.
Yeah, and perhaps that would kind of create more of a local farming approach, rather than grow chopping down trees in Brazil to grow soy that you can ship over to the US. You can feed cattle so that you can make burgers out of it.
Yeah, it's so horrible. I completely, and I noticed how many times you just said so that you can, and it's like so far removed.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, Greg and I were talking about this on the phone the other day. I was saying how certain habits of my friends, not to say that my habits are so great. I live in Los Angeles. I drive a car. For me, I'm sure my footprint is quite large. But some habits that my friends have seem so unappealing to me. And I was talking with Greg about this friend who invited me to this restaurant the other day, and he was like, yeah, they fly in the seafood from wherever and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, how does that sound appetizing to you, that it came from so far away? And Greg reminded me of Michael Pollan's term, diesel soaked food, which I thought was an amazing phrase for just things people think they're appetizing. But to me, it's like, I don't want to eat seafood that was flown across the world in a jet. I want to eat I don't think I even want to eat seafood. You know what I mean? Like, I want to eat something local that didn't fly on a plane, like just the enormity of the footprint is just so unappetizing to me. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. I must admit, I do like me some tuna sashimi, though.
Well, on a special occasion, maybe, So, yeah, I think that's all my articles. So I'm happy to turn it over to you.
Okay. I have an article here. So this is kind of more on the coordination side. I have an article here about an AR pioneer who warns that metaverse could make reality disappear. So it's kind of like a dark prediction, dystopian prediction. So I'll just kind of read a bit here. An innovator in early AR systems has a dire prediction. The metaverse could change the fabric of reality as we know it. Louis Rosenberg, a computer scientist and developer of the first functional AR system at the Air Force Research Laboratory, penned an op-ed in Big Think this weekend that warned the metaverse, an immersive VR and AR world currently being developed by the company formerly known as Facebook, could create what sounds like a real-life cyberpunk dystopia. Here's a quote. I'm concerned about the legitimate uses of AR by the powerful platform providers that will control the infrastructure, Rosenberg wrote in the essay. Among Rosenberg's concerns is that third parties could introduce paid filter layers that allow certain users to see specific tags over real-life people. These tags might float above every person's head, for instance, and provide bits of information about them. And they use that layer to tag individuals with bold flashing words like alcoholic or immigrant or atheist or racist, or even less charged words like Democrat or Republican. He said the virtual overlays could easily be designed to amplify political division, ostracize certain groups, even drive hatred and mistrust. He's also concerned that the metaverse would make reality disappear by creating a system in which people can't simply step away from their devices to have real-world interactions. The idea is that the metaverse could grow to a point at which it impacts essentially every facet of our lives, and it'd be near impossible for most to just walk away. That means we'd all be constantly exposed to whatever false reality third parties might want to show us, since there'd be an AR overlay over everything. Rosenberg isn't the only one who's concerned either. Ethan Zuckerman, the director of the Initiative for Digital Infrastructure at the University of Massachusetts, also penned an op-ed in The Atlantic recently deriding Meta's ambitious project. Zuckerman created a very early version of the metaverse back in 1994 and believes that the metaverse is poised to do more harm than good. Facebook's promised metaverse is about distracting us from the world it's helped break, Zuckerman said. So I just thought I'd read that whole article because I think it really well explains, my concerns.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about the metaverse, about people's mental health, especially because I feel like the more people retreat into this space, the more people disengage with reality, because we already are kind of living in a mixed reality system with so much of our lives online. And there's just a lot. Like, I was watching a video last night that I put in Discord about a term called techno-feudalism, which is sort of this post-capitalist idea where you're living in this world of Facebook, for example, and unlike in a capitalist society where a bunch of different shops on a street might be owned by different people and people have different currencies and agency to buy and sell whatever, and whatever. In Facebook, I'm refusing to call it Meta for right now. You have this guy, this one overlord CEO who's in charge of every single element, who can buy, who can sell, what can be purchased. If they want you to see something, they can force you to see it. If they don't want you to see something, you will absolutely never see it. It's and it's feudalism really, because like the idea is that all of this power is concentrated just to one person, and you really don't have a choice. It's very hard to live in modern society without engaging in Facebook in some way. And unless you're a shareholder, and meaning that you own stock, you gain absolutely nothing from this, obviously, but you continue to enrich them with your data and your clicks and your behavior, which they monetize. And I think that system is just going to be put on steroids with the metaverse, whether it's controlled by, again, Mark Zuckerberg or someone else. I just worry about people's mental health, because we already see that people, especially young people, like, because they don't have like the life experience that some older people do, they have grown up in this mixed reality environment where their LinkedIn page is their currency at work, their Instagram profile is their currency at school, and so forth. I just think it's very dangerous for people to become disengaged with reality, because there are a lot of amazing things about reality, like concerts, music concerts, and eating a meal with friends, and nature, and whatever. And if people get disengaged from that even further, I think that is dangerous.
Yeah, I think that when I kind of imagine a more utopian mixed reality universe, I think of it more as tools that help us connect rather than disconnect. Tools that help us want to meet each other in the real world, help us discover each other so that we can meet in the real world, et cetera, et cetera. There's another way to slice the metaverse, and it's kind of similar to my thinking about advertising. It's like we can't make it go away. It's kind of here. So really, if we want to kind of help make the world a better place, we have to kind of, change it from within, so to speak. So that's kind of, my attitude about it. So I'm always on the lookout for, projects that might reflect this. And this is why I'm still kind of curious about this Project Liberty, this billionaire Frank McCourt, who, as much as I can understand so far, it seems pretty cool. Although I'm always a little bit nervous around words like liberty, because it can have other connotations, which I won't get into. But he has set up this organization. It's a nonprofit called DSNP, Decentralized Social Networking Protocol. And he's hoping to kind of create an open protocol that allows for people to carry their self-sovereign ID with them and transfer it. As I understand it, that's kind of one of the main focuses. So he's trying to create an open spec for helping make Facebook obsolete. So I don't know. I'm gonna do more research into this organization, Project Liberty, and the DSNP. I understand there's people with the Team Human community that are talking about it. So I'm going to try to kind of spend a little more energy at kind of seeing if there's something about this organization, and then perhaps, ideally, maybe there's some kind of symbiosis that could occur between them and RChain.
I think it's great that people are creating these alternatives, but I think it's going to be hard to create something that can compete with Facebook, because Facebook was designed to be a toll booth for society. Like, I watched a lot of interviews or talks from people who worked there and at other tech companies, just because I think it's interesting. And they often talk about people who work with Mark Zuckerberg. They talk about the fact that in the beginning, he designed it to be a toll booth for society. That's what he wanted. He didn't want to make money in the beginning. He didn't sell it to Yahoo, early on. He wanted growth so that it would be impossible for people to not, enrich the platform in some way. So he achieved that. And I think, I'm not sure if there's ever going to be, of course, in the future, someday there will be an alternative that is, nothing lasts forever, obviously. But I think one small thing that we can do is just unplug ourselves from that space, as much as, like, for example, yesterday I went on a hike with a friend and I did have my phone with me, but I didn't use my phone. I just enjoyed, actually, okay, I did take a couple pictures, but this example is getting thinner by the moment, but I just enjoyed being in nature and walked a few miles with my friend. And that was very restorative for me. And I think we can all find time to unplug from these, feudalistic, techno-feudalistic empires, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can see chinks in the armor of Facebook right now. And I think there is almost a window of opportunity at the moment as Web 2.0 shifts to Web 3.0, and we see decentralization as kind of a common theme amongst a lot of investors right now. I think that there's a potential with all of the government scrutiny that Facebook is under right now and the PR problem they have, where they literally had to change their name because it's so scorned. So, there's a lot of opposition to Facebook right now, and I think they have peaked. The one area of concern is that they are dominating the VR space. The Oculus Quest 2 is a fantastically successful product. And most VR that's being developed is designed for, the Quest. Although there are competing products, but that's a concern. But yeah, I do think that there's an opportunity here that's kind of happening within the next now to 5 years.
Yeah, I love that we used to talk about peak oil and now we talk about peak Mark.
Yeah.
Peak Meta. Yeah, it's a very strange time to, wow. The landscape is changing very quickly, but yeah, tricky to predict the future. But we definitely have to beware. And I hope that you're right about the holes in the armor of Facebook. Yeah, and I love that you use the word scorned. I think that's a great word.
I think it's actually pretty spot on in this case.
Oh, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. And yeah, but in America, it never ceases to amaze me how much success a scorned person or company can have. But hopefully we're starting to learn a lesson with that. And also what's interesting along those lines is on YouTube, I'm seeing more and more videos recommended to me, vlogs of people who say that they've left social media and they do a little vlog report about how they've enjoyed their time or not, or what they miss about it or what they don't. So I think that's also becoming a more popular thing, is for people to leave social media. And I guess you could say, well, then why are they on YouTube? But YouTube isn't really you don't hang around and scroll on YouTube all day like you do on the other apps. So I think it's a trend that's gaining momentum.
Well, that's interesting. Steve, I noticed you're here. Do you have anything you'd like to talk about?
Well, let's see. Yeah, I was in the RPI meeting earlier, so that ended, and I thought I'd jump over and say hello. Well, let's see. Well, one thing that's sort of come across my radar, I think it was brought to my attention by Dan Conley, which is he posted a link to Grassroots Carbon. They're an Australian company. The whole idea about carbon capture with grasses to store the carbon in soils. So I've been was kind of researching that, and apparently we have something similar to grassroots carbon here in the States. I think they're also called grassroots, but they're out of Austin, Texas. And they help farmers and ranchers with the idea of they're planting grasses on their land for capturing the carbon, which goes into the soil, and that carbon capture they use for carbon credits. So I'm not sure as far as the economics and the viability of it, but it's if you have some a lot of land in Texas, they're more concerned about the mineral rights. It's not what's on the topsoil, but it's what's way down deep. They're looking for the oil underneath, so that surface layer may go unused. So here's a way for those landowners to have some productivity in that topsoil by growing grasses to capture carbon and use that to secure carbon credits. So that's my general understanding in just an hour or so of just kind of reading about it. And I may have had a little background knowledge, but there's a whole the whole science behind topsoil. There's quite a bit there that as far as the longevity of the carbon that stays in the soil. And is it going to be there for 10 years? Is it going to be there for 100 years? And then there's the microbes that eat the carbon once it's in the soil, which releases it back into the atmosphere. So that's another component that you have to look into. So, but I thought it was a fascinating area of investigation, because there's the mechanical carbon sequestration, in Iceland or somewhere. I think Nora posted an article a few weeks back where these giant machines are trying to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. And you've got 2 or 3 of the machines, and it's they got a long way to go before they make a dent. But if you have topsoil or these land that's that's just sitting there, perhaps grasses can be used to capture that carbon, and there's a lot of topsoil that could be potentially used for that, perhaps. So just another approach, it seems. So yeah, that's what I've been kind of looking into.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love hearing more about these different projects that are trying to help us all survive this terrible inferno. But yeah, that's great. So thank you so much for sharing that. I wonder if we'll hear anything from Greg, or perhaps we should wrap up our discussion because we only have about 3 minutes left. Seems like perhaps Greg is unavailable. So are there any other final comments? Anything else anybody wants to add?
No, just thanks for bringing that to our attention, Steve.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, let's hear more from that in the future, or other projects that you find. I love knowing what's going on.
Yeah,
so thank you everybody for this great discussion. This was a very enjoyable talk, I think, and I hope that the listeners learn something or have some thread that takes them down a new path. So thank you, everybody. Make sure you're subscribed to RChain on YouTube, and we will see you on the next one.
Bye, everybody.